Alright, what's up guys? So, advanced footwork. So hopefully you've watched the first video on basic footwork. Here we're going to just take a look at some more advanced footwork patterns you see in boxing and some easy ways to practice them so they become natural, okay? So the first one we're going to look at, last video we talked about these kind of big shuffle steps. It's an exaggeration of the basic footwork movement, right? So it's coming from a weight shift. That's what's generating the motion here. So I got my foot here, my lead foot, my head's over that lead foot. I shift my weight and turn my hips. There's like a pulling motion between my feet as well. And then my feet replace each other, right? My back foot replaces my front foot, okay? That's an exaggeration. That's how you could practice that motion, right? You practice it just basically standing in one spot. Take a step over. And make it more subtle. Right? So that's how you get that little shuffle down. I'm kind of just standing in one spot. But that's really useful because if you like throw a right hand, I can shuffle over. And now I got an angle, right? I'm basically kind of standing southpaw, but I can shuffle over, shuffle, shuffle. Boom. So you get those Tyson-style little shifts. The next footwork exercise is the Lomachenko Shuffle, right? These Lomachenko-style shuffles. It's basically the same thing we were just doing, but there's just a little more turn in the hips. So you get a little more of a, you change the angle a little bit more. So you see him warming up. This video is about Lomachenko warming up, and he's standing pretty much neutral. He steps over like this, right? Just like the earlier exercise. But I turn my hips more, so now I'm facing this direction. Now when I do it this way, I step, swing, and turn. Now I'm facing the opposite direction, right? So you get these kind of 180-degree pivots, right? And he uses that to get angles. He throws shots down the center line, and then off of the right hand, just like in the first exercise, he shuffles over, and then he gets that angle here, right? If you're standing orthodox, you can do it. You can throw a left hand, and you get that angle here, right? So practice this from your neutral stance. Step over to the side and turn. Now from here, step, shuffle, and turn. Right? Boom, boom. Add your punches. Boom, 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 boom. Right? So practice this from your neutral stance. And then you'll, when you get in your stance, you'll get a feel for it when you get in your stance, okay? So practice it neutral, and then practice it from your stance, all right? So you got to get a feel for after which punch, right? I step and throw the rear hand, and then I go in this direction. Now from here, I basically switch stance. So when I throw the rear hand again, I'm going in the other direction, okay? Probably harder to explain than it is to actually do. So you're gonna have to try it out. But once you get back in your normal stance, try these shuffles, okay? If you've watched the first video, hopefully you've practiced some of the exercises, and that basic shuffle first should be comfortable. And the Lomachenko thing is basically the same thing. There's just a little more turn in the hips when you're doing the shuffle motion. It gets more of an angle, okay? All right. The Xmas Tree. If you watch any Russian school boxing, Coach Frolov talks about the Xmas Tree motion. It's great for cutting off the ring. So I'm making these kind of zigzags. I get to a point where I want to change. I bring my foot back, and I'm basically kind of changing stance. But it's a shuffle. The steps are shuffle motions, right? From my weight shift, I get my steps. So I'm shifting into these little shuffles, but I'm getting a zigzagging kind of motion. So go forward and backwards. So here, I kind of pull up to a neutral stance and I step back. So this neutral stance is really important because it allows you to kind of switch directions and change stances on the fly, right? That's why guys like Willie Pep are so great. You know, we'll talk about him later in the video. But practice this Christmas tree, right? Go forwards. You can add your punches. Boom, boom, boom. Go backwards. Practice this Christmas tree pattern. It's a very difficult thing to catch someone when they're doing this kind of Christmas tree pattern. So if you're moving away from someone, you know, like the backward motion, they're going to have a hard time following you if you can zigzag and cut angles like this. If you're trying to cut off the ring, it's great for that as well, right? If you're cutting off the ring, you get more squared up because you want to box him in more, right? So it's great for that. All right, check hook. So what we'll do here, this is basically kind of a side step, a pivot, and a punch all at the same time, all right? So from your squared up stance, you turn your hip and your foot will naturally turn with the hip. It should naturally turn with the hip. So I shift my weight over to my right leg and I turn my left hip this way. And the foot kind of goes with the hip. So you see if I add a punch, I'm basically punching 180. So I'll go here, shift, and I punch in the opposite direction, okay? So you practice it standing still like this. And then my other favorite way to practice this is you walk with your punches, right? And then after I throw a punch, I want to turn this way. I just spin my hips basically. So I'm in this position here. So I'm walking, throw a punch. I'm in this position here. My weight's on my right leg. I shift my weight over to my left leg, and as I do so, I kind of turn my hips. Boom. And then I press forward in that direction, right? I'm going backwards. Boom. I threw a punch. My weight's on my left leg. I'm going to turn towards the camera. Boom. Okay? So you get this kind of spinning pivot, which when you get in your stance and then you start practicing this motion, it should feel more natural, okay? So I'm backing up. Opponent's pressing forward like Mayweather, right? When I see the opportunity, I got my weight on my front leg. I'm leaning in, I'm baiting him. And when he makes a move, I shift, just like I was doing with the walking with the punches. I shift and turn, throw a punch, right? You can throw any punch. Your straights will naturally kind of, if you think about throwing a straight, it'll naturally kind of turn into a hook when you turn. So that's how I think of these punches. I just think of them basically as straights. But you can throw uppercuts as well. So you can do this from the back foot as well. It's more of a, you got much more of a, you got your weight on your back foot, opponent's moving forward, and I'm going to have to do more of a spin to do it off the back foot, okay? So practice this one. Do it stationary, learn the movement. Do it walking. Boom. Press forward, right? And do it from your stance, do it from southpaw, okay? Both feet, front foot and back foot. Okay, so the side step, it's pretty similar to the check hook footwork, right? So you can do it with a punch, without a punch. You're basically kind of taking a step, you know, practice it squared up. You're taking a step and pivoting maybe at the same time. Notice how both my feet turn, right? So from your stance, like that on the lead foot, so you kind of step and turn at the same time, and you use that momentum to swing your other foot around, okay? So that's the basic side step motion. On the back foot, you take a step. This one's a little different because you got to step out, and then you pull and turn. So step, pull, and turn your hips to get that side step angle, okay? So you can, again, with the check hook, if you throw a punch at the same time, it's very similar to that motion. But the fast lead foot pivot. So on the lead foot, I can do this really quick one where I might be leaning forward a bit. I might come up on the toe of my back foot, and I turn my hips, and I'm going to turn both feet at the same time and get a really fast pivot. So this is great if your opponent lunges in with the right hand. You get a really fast pivot like that. You can keep your arm up and try to push him away, but usually you end up kind of bladed anyway, so it becomes like a built-in kind of shoulder roll, and your head turns. So if he does end up hitting you, you're kind of rolling with the punch anyways. But it's a really fast move, changes the angle really quickly, okay? And again, it's great for if you're orthodox and he tries to throw a lunging right hand. It's coming from this direction, and you're on the outside, so you see it coming, and you can just cut a quick little pivot, okay? Okay, so this one you see usually when you're kind of far away from your opponent and just circling around the ring and trying to stay on the outside. You'll see guys, they do this little L step. So it's very similar to like the back foot check hook side step kind of footwork, where you step your back foot, you pull your lead foot back almost to your back foot, and then you step this one out horizontally and you replace, changing the angle. So when you see guys do it fast, it does this kind of little gallopy, kind of carves like an L shape, okay? So this one, again, you see it on the outside, and it's just kind of a quick little angle change. And you want to do this when you're kind of far away from your opponent. And it usually happens naturally. Okay? So you can practice it, but it usually happens naturally, and it just gives you a little quick step when you're on the outside. Again, this is just for when you're away from your opponent, circling the ring and just trying to maybe cut an angle a little faster on the outside, okay? Okay. The cross step. So this is going to break the sacred footwork rule of never crossing your feet, okay? But there's a time and a place where you can do this, right? If you watch Muhammad Ali, when he circles, when he's up on his toes and he's circling, he does kind of do it. It can be done. I've seen Mayweather do it. You see it every now and then. It's not something that, you really want to do all the time, and you got to know when and where to do it, so that's why this is an advanced footwork technique, okay? But it can be done, and it's got to be done for a purpose, I think, and you got to understand the range. Like if you're out of range, you can do this kind of thing to get a real good advantage because you can step quicker than somebody else, right? When you're far enough away. I'm way out here, and I can, I get a quicker kind of little box step. So when you're outside of range, you can pretty much do whatever you want. But there are other applications. So this one is going to have a little cross step and a pivot. So I learned this from Anderson Silva. Has a really good book, where he goes over all these different punching combinations, striking combinations. But the footwork section is really good in that book. And when I was first learning, I used to just do one page a week and just practice these footwork, basic footwork patterns, right? And one of them was this cross step. So if I'm in my stance here, I take a step outside and I get a quick pivot like that, okay? So in the pivot section from part 1, this pivot here is a really fast pivot, right? So I think that's part of the reason why you can get away with this step. So, okay, so if my opponent's foot is right here, and we're basically just outside the pocket, right? So his foot's lined up with my center line, mine's lined up with his. if he's really bladed, maybe I'm having a hard time getting into a punching range with him. We're basically stuck. I'm stuck to using my left hand because he's so bladed, right? So I can fake, step outside his foot. So he's facing this way. So I'm stepping towards his blind side, spin, and you can catch him like that. All right. So watch Mayweather versus Arturo Gatti, right? He does this kind of thing a lot. Gets to the outside. Again, this is not something you want to do all the time. It has a specific purpose, and he's not going to let you do that, right? He's going to be spinning and trying to catch you as you're doing that. So you gotta fake it, right? You can also do this kind of move off the back foot, right? So from my stance here, I think this was another one taught in that Anderson Silva book, and this is another one that I was like, you know, I don't think I've ever seen this actually done in a fight, right? You know, maybe like Boots Ennis might be able to pull this off, but this one is, I think this one is very dangerous, way more dangerous than the first one, the first cross step kind of pivot. This one from the back foot. So my opponent's here, we're lined up. I probably will want to be pretty far away, maybe get him to throw a right hand. I'm gonna slip, you know, put my weight on my left foot, step, and then I could pivot right there. Okay? So I don't remember. I think I saw that in the Anderson Silva book, but I've also seen it taught in Rob's School of Boxing. It's really good Soviet boxing YouTube channel, and he was showing that exercise. So that's what reminded me of that. Again, that one's really dangerous. Apart from just, you know, practicing different footwork drills, I would not try to do that in an actual boxing match. I think. But you know, I think it's cool. It's cool to practice, something to think about. Okay. Okay, the pendulum step. So the pendulum step, you see a lot of Cuban fighters like to use this a lot. You're kind of bouncing. It uses a very, you know, uses a lot of the bounce, but you're feigning forward and backwards. Okay, so from the side view, from my stance. So you're pretty much on your toes using the bounce, but you're going forward, back. You're pushing your weight forward to get this lead leg, so your lead leg moves forward a bit, and then you bounce it back. Right? So this is much more the traditional boxer's bounce. Right? A lot of kind of beginners, or a lot of times you see people doing this up and down bounce. You can get some movement out of here, but it's very tiring. This pendulum step is I think it's more controlled, and you get more forward backward movement out of it. I feel like it's a little more applicable, right? Again, this wouldn't be something I would do a full fight. It will still make you tired, but you don't have to do a huge bounce. So I'm really kind of, my back foot is staying, my toe is staying on the ground, and I'm just kind of pushing forward and backwards. I'm kind of rocking my weight back and forth like this. So you can practice this from your neutral stance. I'm on my toes, and I'm shifting my weight like this between my feet here. Right? So you can practice it like that. So again, this is it's similar to the bounce. Makes you very mobile. Makes you look really frenetic, right? So a lot of times when you start doing all this crazy movement like this, your opponent will try to match that, right? So that's a way that it's kind of useful. It makes him think that you're ready to attack. So maybe you aren't. Maybe you're resting, but you just want to draw a counter. All right. So it's got its uses. So Cuban fighters, Soviet system. They use it very well, so check that out. All right. I call this one the compass drill. So like I've kind of said earlier, this neutral stance is great because you can basically step in any direction from this stance. So once you get used to kind of shifting your weight from this neutral stance, this is a cool drill. I'm basically going to step in every direction. So I'm going to keep my left foot planted. So I step forward, come back to a little bit neutral at an angle, right? Straight out to the side, back at an angle, straight back. So again, using weight shifts for my steps, okay? So I'm going to do the same thing with the left leg. The forward one feels weird. You got to have a little bit wide. You got to have your base wide. You got to do a little turn to your hip for these forward steps. And you got the diagonal, side, back diagonal, and straight back. Okay? So you're getting yourself used to stepping in any direction off of this neutral stance. Right? So from your normal stance, you might throw a combination, right? We talked about that in the last video. From your normal stance, you might throw a combination, roll or shuffle out, and you end up at neutral, right? And you wait for your opponent to do something. He steps forward, boom, you know, and then you counter. You can move off of that neutral stance. So it's a good bait, right? It's Willie Pep style. So once you get used to these steps, going in all directions like that, you can switch it up, start changing the feet. Right? And then eventually you want to be able to do it with your punches as well, right? Forward, diagonal, side, boom, 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 back diagonal, back, switch legs, forward, diagonal, side, back diagonal, back. And then once you can add your punches, you know, you start switching it up. Throwing your punches, stepping in all directions from your neutral stance, right? These weight shifts cause your steps. Your steps are made by weight shifts, right? Your hands and your feet are syncing up, right? And this drill will help you no longer be stuck in one position, right? You want to be a 360-degree fighter. You want to be able to at least defend yourself from any position until you can get back to your normal stance, all right? This drill is great for that kind of movement, all right? Coming right off of the compass drill are these triangle steps, or V steps. So this alone is a really good footwork drill. You throw your combo, you pull back to neutral, and then you step forward in the opposite stance and repeat, okay? You make like a triangle, right? You can even do them backwards. So you see this kind of thing in Filipino martial arts. They do these triangles on the floor. It's a great footwork drill. Helps you go from neutral to orthodox and southpaw without having to think about it, right? It's great. It's very similar to Willie Pep, right? After he throws a combo, or when he's circling the ring, he's standing in a neutral stance, steps forward, and he does these little V steps, or triangle steps. Sets up angles off of that, okay? So try these, try the triangle steps, okay? Hi, baby. Okay, go lay down. Lay down right here and watch, okay? So, being able to fight from orthodox, southpaw, being comfortable from this neutral stance, being able to fight from the neutral stance, okay? And shifting in to all these different stances. It's very useful, okay? So it's something you should at least practice, even if you don't think that that you would ever fight that way. That's okay, all right? Everybody's got their different styles. For me, I like it. I like to be very fluid with my stance, okay? Gives me a lot of movement. I feel like I have more options, okay? But even if you disagree, at least try it out, because it's going to help your coordination and your balance, all right? So, you know, guys like Willie Pep, I mentioned him a lot when talking about this footwork because he uses it, and that's one of my big inspirations for these kind of neutral style footwork drills, okay? So check him out. You know, again, if you don't agree, that's okay, but at least try these footwork drills for this neutral stance, okay? Okay, so shifting. You see a lot of really good pressure fighters like Triple G, Roman Gonzalez, and when they are pressing forward, sometimes they'll shift forward into southpaw like this, right? So you want to be able to do this shifting footwork. If this is more of a self-defense situation, you really want to be able to do the shifting footwork, because in that kind of situation, you're looking to more so overwhelm somebody, even if it's for an instant to get to safety, but you're looking to overwhelm somebody more than you know, take your time and set things up. So that's kind of what this footwork does. You're walking someone down, and what you do, what I like to do, is you throw the rear hand and you double it up. So I double it up to cover my shift. And then from here I can do it again. And you cover a lot of distance that way. If you use weight shifts for these steps, you get your head moved off the line automatically, okay? So practice these. Walking straight forward. Throwing your punches. You can throw these doubles. One. Okay? So once you shift, there might be a little tap. And you can add a little dip to help with your head movement as well, right? That's the basic idea, walking straight forward, straight back, shifting and using these weight shifts for your steps. Okay? It's just another kind of footwork technique. Makes you way more versatile, especially if you're a pressure fighter. You know, I'd be surprised if you showed me a pressure fighter who did not do this kind of shifting forward technique. I believe it was created by Bob Fitzsimmons, called the Fitzsimmons Shift. He's usually credited with this kind of shifting footwork. You use it to shift forward into a powerful punch. Boom, you got all your weights traveling forward right there. So this left becomes a left straight. If I throw a boom, boom, and I'm ready to shift, boom. So Bob Fitzsimmons Shift. So he's usually credited with creating this kind of shifting footwork, and he would use it to shift into punches, all right? Add a lot of power into your punches. So just like the last shift, if I'm orthodox and I throw maybe a fake or a rear hand, boom, I got the double one coming up, and then I can shift into a powerful, what would become a left straight off this shifting kind of footwork, right? So if you've seen the first video, it's basically that same kind of walking footwork drill. It's the same kind of coordination of that. I'm just adding a lot more power into my shots. I'm getting lower. I'm exaggerating the head movement a lot more, all right? So it's very similar to that drill. But another way you can do it is actually, you know, the coordination for this is you got your jab here, but when I shift over to the right hand, it's left foot, right hand. That's left hand, right foot, right? But sometimes you can shift over and land with the same hand and same foot going forward, right? I think Tyson did this every now and then. You'll see guys when they really want to throw a big punch, sometimes they'll swing their whole body into a big punch like that, right? So that's just another variation of the shifting. Not as common as this way, where when I move forward, the coordination is kind of opposites. It's a different coordination going backwards, all right? I talked about that in the first video. But these big shifts every now and then, right? Sometimes you just throw so much power in the shot that you have to swing your whole body and catch yourself, okay? That's another kind of thing that reminds me of kind of like what Bernard Hopkins does sometimes when he shifts. He throws a big shot and he really just wants to get close to the guy, right? But you'll see it when someone's throwing really big punches. Sometimes they might kind of even be off balance, but it's for a purpose, all right? So this is another one that kind of bends the rules of footwork, but you'll see it every now and then. It has its uses, right? It allows you to throw a big, heavy shot and get close to the opponent at the same time, okay? Okay, so talking about this shifting kind of footwork, right? You can shift in while throwing combinations, right? But these backwards shifts, make sure you spend some time with this. If you watch some James Toney, once he moves in on the inside, and when he wants to move away from his opponent, he does these kind of backward shifts, okay? Put your weight on the back foot, and then you do this pivot, right? And you can get low, so if he tries to follow you, you got head movement, right? James Toney does that all the time. It's one of, I consider that like one of his signature moves. It's great. He uses it while moving backwards. And from here, right, so he's in, he throws a combo, he wants to get away, step, you get some head movement automatically from these weight shifts, boom, and he'll throw a combination from southpaw, right? So he can attack from southpaw, and maybe that'll stop the guy from following him, and then he can do the other pivot and get away to safety, okay? So it's usually like a two pivot, so it's like a shifting backwards pivot, okay? Okay, sneaking the rear foot up. So this is great when you do want to use that lunging step. Sometimes from your stance to make a big lunging step, you have a lot of distance to cover, and sometimes, you know, it can be easy to predict if that's all you're doing. He's going to get a read on that pretty quickly. But what you can do to be a little tricky, you can throw some jabs or feints. You bring your lead foot up just like an inch or two as you're probing or jabbing with your lead hand. So you're throwing these kind of distraction punches. You bring your lead foot up, and that gives you, it preps you more for that lunge, and you can shoot a farther distance off of that push, right? So you bring the lead foot up, and you get a little bit more distance, and it's just a trickier way to use that lunge step. So try that one out. All right, so crossing your feet, right, like this. So we talked earlier about those cross step pivots, right, when you kind of go like this and then pivot. And like I was saying earlier, depending, from my point of view, it's almost not really a cross step, but it is dangerous because you kind of give your opponent a lot of a blind side, right? for that split second, but that pivot's so quick you can kind of get away with it, right? But even if he does, if you see he's gonna attack, you can dip, you can pivot and then shuffle, right? So you gotta be aware when you're using that one. So it's arguably, you can argue that that's not even a cross step, but it is pretty dangerous, right? You gotta use it, you gotta really set it up and use it unpredictably. But crossing your feet, this is just a basic footwork drill. This is not something you really want to be doing in the ring unless you're really aware of the distance and what's happening. But you see Cuban fighters use this. Okay, so you see Cuban boxers do these kind of footwork drills sometimes. So why would you do that? Well, for me, I think it's just good mobility practice because you might end up in a situation where your feet do end up crossing like this, and you want to have the ability to get out of that position as fast as possible. So it's more of a mobility exercise than an actual technique. But yeah, you see Cuban fighters do some kind of crossing their foot drills like this. You see Lomachenko warming up. He does this cross. He does that kind of pattern as one of his warm-ups. So it's just a mobility exercise. So that one might be one to practice just to prepare you for a situation where your feet end up crossed and you need to get out of it, okay? Okay, so the normal kind of shifting footwork on these straight blasts or just straightforward shifting, right? It's opposite. When I go forward, it's right hand, left foot, right? We've talked about that. Left hand, right foot. So you can also practice this one going forward, same hand, same foot. So this is going to feel awkward at first, okay? It's going to feel awkward at first, and it doesn't feel like real punches, but this is, again, this is a really good coordination exercise. And you do see this kind of thing used every now and then. Someone will lunge forward, and land with this same foot, same hand kind of footwork. And it adds a lot of power on your shot, closes the distance, and it's a little unpredictable, okay? So again, you'd have to set that kind of thing up. Maybe throw a 1, 2, boom, right? But practicing this footwork drill. So I'm going left hand, left foot, right hand, right foot. Okay? Now when I go backwards, it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be right hand, left foot. Okay? So it really switches, it switches up the coordination for those shifting footwork drills, okay? So it's cool. It helps you just add another layer of coordination, okay? So try that one out, and again, it does have a use if you want to do that kind of same hand, same foot, shifting punch. Again, you'd have to set that up, but it helps you get the coordination for that, okay? Okay guys, so advanced circling. All right, in the basic footwork video, we talked about circling from your stance, where you basically are trying to keep your stance while you circle around an object. And the object's going to represent, obviously, your opponent, okay? Then the other way of circling is ring circles, right? So that was the other drill where you did like a lateral stance, and you move big circles around the ring, okay? So this is, in reality, what you do is you're blending the two together, okay? If you are only up in this lateral stance, moving around your opponent, you're not really a threat to him, so he's going to get more and more aggressive, trying to cut the ring off and probably going to start throwing bigger looping punches at you, okay? So when you are up in this lateral kind of stance, you circle around for a little bit, but then you got to get set. You set back down. You know, there's an exchange, you feign, you do something. Maybe you initiate an exchange and counter, and then you're up, you move around, and then you reset, okay? Same thing with the circling from your stance. If you only do this, we kind of talked about it in the last one, there'll be times when you end up super bladed to your opponent, which can be a bad thing. This bladed stance is not good for moving laterally, right? You can do it, but its strengths are moving forward and back, pivoting, right? That's why you see a lot of guys will pull out into a neutral stance to do the lateral movement, and then they reset, right? A lot of times when you see someone who circles, who's trying to avoid their opponent, they start circling, right? They end up getting pushed towards the ropes, and if they are stuck in this stance, right, you're limiting your offense. There's going to be points where you're going to end up too bladed, and he's going to be able to capitalize because your right hand is no longer available. You'd have to set up your right hand, so you'd have to make space, which can be a bad thing. Like, you'd like to be able to at least just throw it from your stance if you needed to, okay? So when you're circling from your stance, keep that in mind, right? Try to keep your opponent at the end of your jab here. Try not to end up getting too bladed. Okay, so like I was saying, in reality, you blend the two together, right? So in the last video, we talked about, you know, that's kind of just drills, right? You would stay in your stance and circle both directions as a drill to get used to this footwork. You would do it from southpaw as well, right? Like I talk about all the time, training both stances, both sides, right? Then another drill is to do the ring circles and stay in that stance to get used to the footwork. But in reality, you blend them together, okay? So to take this a step further for the advanced circling is when you are circling around your opponent, sometimes you can shift into southpaw. Or if you're already southpaw, you end up orthodox. So the next step is to do the circling drill. Focus on kind of not worrying about which stance you end up in, right? Get used to using both. So here I'm southpaw, pull back, and when I circle around this way, I end up orthodox, right? I might take a step, pivot, boom, boom, southpaw, right? So that is the advanced kind of circling concept, where now you can use this as a drill where you're circling around and you are switching your stance. You're not really worried about which foot's forward. You get in a position where you end up southpaw, that's okay. You can attack from there, pull back laterally, go back to circling in your orthodox, right? And then you might pull back and purposely pull back and then step forward in the opposite stance to initiate an exchange. And then other times it just kind of happens naturally as you're circling. There's just going to be times when just the angle you are to the object you're circling, it's easier to, instead of trying to keep your stance, it's going to be easier to just switch, right? So that is the advanced circling drill. You put an object in the center, circle around it, and now you're going to actually try to get in positions where you end up switching your stance. You're going to get comfortable switching your stance while circling an object, okay? All right, the last advanced footwork technique. This is the half step back. So this one's pretty simple compared to a lot of the other drills in this advanced footwork tutorial. But this one, you know, we talked about the neutral stance and getting these little half steps, right? All directions. Now from your stance, what you can do is you lean forward a little bit and you bait the opponent to throw a punch, right? This is kind of like the pull counter for Mayweather. He leans forward and he's just waiting for the opponent to throw a jab, and when they do, he pulls back, right? So the footwork on this is just, so he's up on his toe when he's leaning forward like this. So when he takes that half step back, he uses the toe to spring forward into a counter, right? So if you look, that half step back can give me quite a bit of head movement away from the punch. Boom. Okay? So it's literally just a little half step back. Now you don't always have to be leaning forward to do that. You can already be kind of on the back foot here. And when he tries to move forward or throw a jab, just a half step back, right? From here. I'm standing kind of bladed. He throws a jab. Just a little half step back. Okay? Pretty simple one, but very effective, right? If you're constantly taking these little half step backs and switching up your defense, sometimes you block, sometimes you cover, sometimes you're using head movement, other times half step back, right? It just adds another kind of level of unpredictability, which is the name of the game, right? You want to be as unpredictable as possible. You cannot do the same thing every time. That's what we got to break out of this. A lot of people are stuck in this way of thinking where they think, oh, the defense for a left hook is A, and they think A is going to work every single time, which is not true. It might work once or twice, but your opponent is going to pick up on things, right? Even if he has no experience, if he's brand new, you can't just assume that he's not going to have like any wits about him, and you're going to be able to run the same move on him over and over and over again and expect the same results. Okay, it's you know, boxing is more it's not like that, right? You can't do the same thing every time. Something that should work according to the boxing rule book might not work because your opponent might have the experience that he already knows you're going to do that because of your certain the level you're at and the level he's at experience-wise, okay? So if you're able to switch things up, you become a better fighter just by being unpredictable, right? So this is, it's 80, 90% mental, you know, 80, 90% mental. You got to be smart. You got to think. You got to be able to adjust, right? That's what's going to make you better than everyone else. You know, you also have to have the physical skills, but you got to be able to think on your toes. You got to be able to think while you're just moving around like this, right? So that's where a lot of these stationary exercises come into play, right? The stationary kind of just shadow boxing drills from video 1, from part 1. It's what they help you do. You just get so used to doing this that the coordination becomes so natural that you're able to think while doing it, okay? So then when you get in your stance and start moving around, all that coordination, that rhythm between your hands and feet is already there. You don't really have to think about this kind of thing. You're able to think about what you're gonna do, what he's doing, how you can capitalize on it, okay? So I hope you like these footwork drills. This is advanced footwork, all right? This is there's a lot of stuff here. It's going to take time to practice some of these things, but you know, pick out the ones you like, and then come back and pick out some of the other ones and spend some time with them. Spend a week or so on each exercise. But you know, you're gonna have to practice these kind of things until they become natural. That's the whole point. Okay, so I hope you like the video. Try out the footwork exercises. Like the video, sub the channel. Peace.